$15,000. Emily. That was the first thing, my husband, Mark said to me as I stood in the cold hallway outside the ICU. Not how's your mom doing? Not are you okay? Not even did she make it through the night. Just that number. That demand. Thrown at me like I owed him something. I remember blinking at him, my mind still foggy from 30 hours without sleep. The scent of antiseptic burned my nose. Machines beeped behind the thick sliding doors. My mother, my only remaining parent, was fighting for her life on the other side. And Mark, my own husband, was fighting over money. I whispered, "Mark, not now. Please, not here." But he didn't lower his voice. He didn't step closer to comfort me. He didn't soften the anger etched across his face. He moved in front of me, blocking the hallway, jaw clenching. "You promised me the money weeks ago. I need it today. Emily, I am not playing games with you anymore." Games. That word slammed into my chest. Because while my mother had slipped into critical condition overnight, while I'd been calling relatives who never answered, while I'd been begging nurses for updates, Mark had been texting me in all caps about his money. A nurse pushed a rolling cart past us, pausing just long enough to give me a sympathetic look. That's when I realized her eyes weren't just sympathetic, they were embarrassed for me. I swallowed hard. "Can we talk about this later? My mom might not make it through the afternoon." Mark scoffed. "Emily, your mom has been sick for months. This isn't new. What is new is that you think you can ignore your responsibilities because everything suddenly has to revolve around her." I felt my chest tighten in a way I'd never felt before, tight enough to make me wonder if grief and fury could physically choke a person. I stepped aside, wanting to walk away, but he followed. He always followed. "Where do you expect me to get $15,000? I finally asked, my voice shaky. "We don't even have that in savings." "You do," he said, dead calm now. "Your mom's life insurance advance." A cold wave rushed through me. "Wait, how do you even know about that?" He shrugged. "Your cousin mentioned it at Thanksgiving. And since nobody else is using that money right now, it makes sense that you help your husband with it." I gasped, actually gasped, because reality hit me so hard it felt like the floor tilted. He wasn't grieving, he wasn't scared, he wasn't even present. He was circling like a vulture, over insurance money. Over my mother's. No. I couldn't even think the words. My phone buzzed. The doctor. I lifted it with trembling hands. "Emily," he said gently through the speaker, "if you want a chance to talk to her, it should be now." Everything inside me broke at once. I pressed the phone to my forehead, tears finally spilling. "Okay. I am coming." When I looked up, Mark wasn't moved by my tears. He wasn't following the doctor's words. He was staring at my phone as if calculating whether $15,000 was worth crying over. "Mark," I whispered, barely audible, "please, just let me go in." He didn't move aside. Not right away. He held that power, the power to block me from my dying mother, for a full, agonizing 5 seconds. Then he stepped back and muttered, "Don't forget we're talking about this after." I walked past him on shaking legs, my palms sweating, my heart pounding. As the IQ doors slid open, I heard him behind me. "I am serious, Emily." I ignored it. I had to. I stepped inside the dimly lit room, surrounded by soft beeping and the low hiss of oxygen. My mom, my strong, funny, stubborn mom, looked so small under the blankets, her skin pale, her breathing shallow. I grabbed her hand. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I am here." Her eyelids fluttered. She couldn't speak, but her fingers twitched around mine. I leaned closer, letting silent tears fall onto the blanket. "I am sorry I wasn't here sooner." I stopped myself. I wasn't going to tell my dying mother that my husband was fighting me over money while she slipped away. Her eyelashes lifted slightly, just enough for her to look at me. And even in that state, barely conscious, her expression changed. Worried, protective, as if she already knew. My mom always knew. Her lips parted, barely making a sound. Leave, my breath caught. Leave? Leave what? Leave who? Before I could ask, her eyes drifted shut again. A nurse stepped in. She can still hear you. Talk to her. I nodded, wiping my face. But as I sat there, holding her hand, looking at the woman who raised me alone, who worked 2 jobs, who never asked for anything, all I could think about was the fact that nobody had come. Not my aunt. Not my cousins. Not the neighbors who'd always said she was like family. Not even the church group she never missed a Sunday with. Nobody. Except me. And Mark, who was here for money. I lowered my head over her hand and whispered a promise. Mom, whatever happens, I won't stay with someone who treats me like this. I won't. I promise. And in that moment, as the machines beeped steadily, and her chest rose and fell in fragile breaths, I didn't know a plot twist was already on its way. One that would turn everything I thought I knew about Mark, about my mother, about my family's silence completely upside down. Emily Parker was, by most standards, a good life kind of woman. She lived in a quiet suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a neat, 2-story house with a small backyard she loved but rarely had time for. Her mornings were spent juggling a mid-level marketing job and the errands that came with keeping a household afloat. Evenings were supposed to be for winding down, but those were often dominated by Mark's endless expectations. She was 33, with shoulder-length brown hair usually pinned back in a messy bun, and hazel eyes that could light up a room but had recently carried the heavy weight of sleepless nights and growing distrust. Emily had always prided herself on loyalty and patience. She believed marriage was about compromise, about sticking it out, even when the smallest things felt like mountains. Her flaw, her Achilles heel, was that she didn't know when to put herself first. She carried the emotional labor of her family, her mother, and her husband, as if it were part of her DNA. And until recently, she had convinced herself that love meant endurance, that the storms in marriage were part of the contract. Mark, on the other hand, was exactly the opposite. At 36, he was ambitious, sharp-tongued, and polished, a high-powered financial consultant who knew how to command respect in boardrooms and at home. But his respect didn't extend to those closest to him. He had a calculating mind, a knack for emotional manipulation, and a belief that life could be measured in assets, liabilities, and leverage, often at the expense of empathy. Mark was the type who always had a plan. That plan, conveniently, put his needs above everyone else's. He didn't cry at funerals. He didn't pause when a loved one was sick, and he certainly didn't forgive what he considered a breach of contract, emotional or financial. To Mark, money was the metric of love, loyalty, and proof of competence, especially from Emily. Their relationship had started in college, at a late-night coffee shop where Emily spilled her latte on Mark's laptop. He had laughed. She had apologized profusely, and somehow, a whirlwind romance began. Fast forward 10 years, they were married, and the charm had faded into a pattern Emily didn't fully recognize until now. Emily's mother, Helen Parker, was a single mom who had raised her with grit, humor, and a stubborn streak that Emily had inherited in part. Helen had worked as a nurse for over 30 years, pouring her life into helping others, only to now sit in a hospital bed as illness threatened her fragile body. Emily's connection to her mother was deep, unbreakable, and complicated, rooted in love, loyalty, and the weight of knowing she was the only one left in Helen's life. Supporting characters included Samantha Sam Lopez, Emily's best friend since college. Sam was loud, unapologetically honest, and a voice of reason Emily often ignored. She ran her own graphic design business and had an uncanny ability to cut through Mark's manipulative layers with a single question. Ben Parker, Emily's younger brother, estranged for years due to family tensions. He was impulsive, reckless, and emotionally detached, yet the one person who could remind Emily of her roots, her mother's values, and the sense of justice she had buried under obligation. Dr. Andrews, the attending physician in the ICU. Calm, professional, and quietly empathetic, He noticed Emily's exhaustion and provided subtle guidance when she needed to make life-altering decisions for her mother. He was more than a doctor. He was a catalyst for Emily's awakening, offering gentle truths that forced her to consider her limits and boundaries. The setting was a carefully crafted backdrop of contemporary American life. Charlotte's tree-lined streets, morning coffee shops buzzing with commuter chatter, and the sprawling hospital corridors created a world that felt intimate yet suffocating. Emily's suburban home reflected stability-painted walls, curated furniture, small touches of her mother's influence, but it also served as a pressure cooker for marital tension, financial strain, and unspoken resentments. Emily's daily life was a balancing act. She juggled work deadlines, household responsibilities, and the invisible weight of Mark's expectations. Every text from him was a small jab, every reminder about bills or obligations a subtle assertion of dominance. At home, conversations were rarely about feelings. They were transactions measured, calculated, and often cold. She had dreams once traveling, writing, maybe opening a small bakery like her grandmother had, but those dreams had been quietly shelved, replaced by survival, compromise, and the constant push to be a good wife. And now, facing her mother's illness and Mark's absurd demand for $15,000, the cracks in her carefully curated life were threatening to split open completely. Her internal struggle was palpable. Every thought ping-ponged between guilt, anger, and longing for freedom. She questioned herself. Am I selfish for wanting to leave? Am I failing as a daughter if I fight for my own boundaries? Emily's mind became a battlefield where love, obligation, and self-preservation collided. Mark, meanwhile, operated in a different rhythm. His world was neat, linear, and centered on control. He kept a meticulously organized calendar, tracked expenses with obsessive precision, and had a way of framing his demands as logic, reason, or fairness, never as cruelty. But his arrogance masked insecurity. His need for dominance was tied to fear of being less than or powerless, especially in a marriage where his control wasn't absolute. Sam's role as the supportive friend created a contrast to Mark's toxicity. She didn't sugarcoat reality. She challenged Emily when she made excuses, reminded her that love didn't require self-destruction, and provided a lens through which Emily could start seeing the patterns she'd been blind to. In this story, Sam would serve as both conscience and catalyst, nudging Emily toward clarity when the world around her felt chaotic. Ben's estrangement added another layer of tension and expectation. His sporadic appearances in Emily's life brought unresolved emotions, sudden conflicts, and at times, moments of unfiltered honesty that cut through Mark's polished manipulation. He was both a mirror and a warning. Family could abandon, ignore, or fail you, but they could also remind you who you truly were if you allowed it. The week after her mother's hospitalization was a slow burn of exhaustion and disbelief for Emily. Every day, she walked the fine line between duty and resentment, hope and despair, and every day, Mark found new ways to make her feel smaller, less in control, less worthy of her own life. It started in the hospital waiting room. Emily had barely managed to sleep 3 hours, curled in a stiff chair, phone buzzing constantly with Mark's reminders about the $15,000. She tried to ignore them, to focus on her mother, but Mark's texts had a surgical precision. Don't forget, 15,000. Tonight. Emily, you promised. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Each ping felt like a slap, a reminder that while her mother hovered between life and death, Mark's priorities remained immovable. By Thursday, she snapped. I can't do this anymore, Mark. She yelled into the phone during one of his relentless calls. My mom's critical, and all you can think about is money. There was a pause on the other end, and then, in that familiar cold, calm tone, Emily, you're overreacting. I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for what's mine. Be a responsible adult. The words landed like ice cubes down her spine. Mine. Not ours. Not yours. And mine. Mine. Later that evening, Emily sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a lukewarm cup of coffee, letting herself finally cry. That's when Sam appeared, unannounced, but completely familiar. "You look like hell," Sam said bluntly, plopping down across from her. Emily sniffled. "Thanks. I guess." "Mark?" Sam asked, already knowing the answer. Emily hesitated, then let it out. "He's obsessed with this money. $15,000. He won't stop. He doesn't care about my mom. He doesn't care about me." Sam's eyes narrowed. "Sounds like he cares about power, about control. Money's just his weapon." Emily shook her head. "I can't even. I don't know if I can keep pretending this is okay." "Good," Sam said. "Stop pretending. Stop explaining yourself. Let him stew. Let him know there are consequences if he keeps treating you like this." But Emily's voice barely above a whisper. "I feel guilty. Like maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I am failing my mom." Sam leaned forward. "Emily, listen. You are not failing anyone. You're the only person standing by your mom right now. That's strength, not failure. And don't let Mark tell you otherwise." Even with Sam's words, guilt dug its claws deeper. Emily realized she had been trained to value others' approval over her own judgment, and Mark had perfected that training. By Friday, tension at home had reached a new peak. Emily came home after visiting her mother, expecting Mark to maybe soften, maybe show a flicker of human empathy. Instead, he had a spreadsheet open on the kitchen counter. Every line item, every projected payment, every contingency plan for the $15,000 meticulously calculated. "I told you," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "I need a plan for the money. And tonight's deadline isn't moving." Emily froze. Something in her chest snapped, not anger, not grief, but clarity. "You know what, Mark? I can't deal with this right now. Not when my mom might die in the hospital. Not when I am living in fear of every text from you." Mark looked up, eyes narrowing. "You think you can just walk away from responsibility? $15,000 isn't optional." "I don't care about your money," Emily screamed. Her voice cracked, echoing in the small, pristine kitchen. "Do you hear me? I care about my mom. About life, not your greed." Mark slammed the laptop shut. "Fine. Then don't come crawling when you realize the consequences of being selfish." The next day brought another blow. Emily's brother, Ben, showed up at the hospital unexpectedly. He hadn't spoken to her in years, not since a heated fight over their father's estate, and his presence was a mixture of shock and judgment. "Where's Mark?" Ben asked, scanning the ICU waiting area with suspicion. "Home. Working on money stuff," Emily muttered. Ben frowned. "Figures. Always the numbers guy, right? Never the heart." Emily felt a flicker of relief, seeing Ben not because he was perfect, but because someone else recognized the injustice she'd been living with. I don't know what to do. Mom's, she's critical. And Mark's, he's impossible." Ben shook his head. "You've been carrying this alone for too long. It's time you realize you don't have to." That night, Emily sat beside her mother, stroking her hand, wondering how she had allowed herself to be trapped in a life where love came with bills and obligation came with fear. She remembered childhood nights, listening to her mother tell stories about resilience, about standing tall even when everyone else disappeared. Helen had lived her entire life doing the right thing, sometimes alone, sometimes underappreciated. And now, Emily saw the same pattern: Mark versus family loyalty, selfishness versus care, power versus empathy. Her internal monologue was relentless. "I am not a weak person. I am not a doormat. I can't keep sacrificing myself for someone who doesn't care about me or Mom." Her reflection in the hospital room window, face pale, hair messy, eyes red, felt like a stranger. But that stranger was waking up. Over the next few days, subtle signs of betrayal surfaced everywhere. Mark started making small, pointed comments in front of nurses and hospital staff, implying Emily was irresponsible and incompetent. He called friends and colleagues, under the guise of concern, making snide remarks about how she handled finances poorly. Even Helen, though weak, picked up on it. She squeezed Emily's hand one evening and whispered, barely audible, Don't let him control you. You've got your own strength." Those words hit Emily like a lightning bolt. Helen, even on the edge of life, saw clearly what Emily had been too exhausted or too loyal to see. And Emily began noticing little patterns: Mark's texts about money arriving right after she called the hospital, his insistence on calculating bills while her mother fought for life, his way of twisting every concern into an accusation. She started writing down incidents in a journal, timestamps, exact words, feelings. It was her first small act of reclaiming control. By the end of that week, Emily's simmering tension had become a full-blown inner storm. She oscillated between rage, sorrow, and clarity, wondering how someone she loved, or at least thought she did, could be so cruel when it mattered most. And just when she thought she'd reached her limit, Mark delivered another blow. "I am serious, Emily. I don't care how your mother is. I need that 15,000. Today." Her heart pounded, her hands shook. And yet, this time, instead of panic, a strange calm washed over her. For the first time, Emily realized something. I don't have to obey his demands. I don't have to negotiate my dignity. I don't have to let fear dictate my choices. It was terrifying and liberating. And that realization, quiet, almost imperceptible, was the tipping point that would lead her toward the breaking point, the major betrayal, and ultimately, the awakening that would change everything. It happened late Friday night. Emily had finally fallen asleep in the hospital waiting room, her body aching, her mind heavy with worry. Then her phone buzzed. "Mark. Where's the money? You promised. Don't make me come to the hospital." Her hands shook as she read it. She'd reached the edge of endurance. The next morning, she overheard something she wasn't meant to hear. A conversation between Mark and one of her mother's nurses. "Don't worry," Mark said, his voice smooth, confident. "I'll get what I need. She won't know it came from me. Emily's too soft to fight." Emily froze. Her blood ran cold. He wasn't just indifferent. He was planning to take advantage of her mother's vulnerability for money. She felt like the floor dropped beneath her. Betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore. It was criminal in intent. Her chest tightened as she confronted him in the hospital hallway. "Mark, how could you? She's in the ICU." Mark cut her off, dismissive. "Relax, Emily. I am just making sure the bills are covered." "You're overreacting. Always overreacting." Emily's voice shook. "You promised me we'd stand together, that you'd care about my family. You promised. Promises don't pay bills," he snapped. In that instant, everything became clear. Her marriage wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, money, and Mark's ego. She felt a sharp clarity piercing the fog of fear and exhaustion. I cannot stay here. I cannot let him manipulate me any longer. And that was the breaking point. For the first time, Emily didn't feel guilt. She didn't feel obligation. She only felt rage and a fierce determination. She turned away from him, walking straight back to her mother's room. As she held Helen's frail hand, she whispered, "I won't let him win. Not now, not ever." It was the moment Emily realized her life would never be the same. Betrayal had stripped away illusions, but it had also sparked something stronger. Awakening, resolve, and the first real step toward freedom. Emily spent the night in the hospital, unable to sleep, replaying Mark's betrayal over and over in her mind. But as dawn broke, a small knock at the ICU door changed everything. It was Dr. Andrews. "Emily," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. Your mom asked to see you alone. She wants to talk to you, without anyone else in the room." Emily's heart skipped. Hesitant, she followed him in. Her mother's eyes were weak, but there was something in her gaze clarity, a quiet command. Helen whispered. You've always put others first, but you don't have to carry everyone else's burdens. Especially not him. Emily blinked back tears. Mom, I can't leave her side. You're not leaving me. You're leaving him. Don't let someone like that dictate your life or your happiness. You have your own strength. You have your own voice. Use it. Those words hit Emily like a tidal wave. Her mother, her rock, her moral compass, was telling her to stop sacrificing herself. The realization was immediate. She could fight back. She could reclaim control over her life, her money, and her choices. She didn't have to obey Mark's demands. She didn't have to accept betrayal silently. Later that morning, Emily returned to the empty hallway and saw Mark on his phone, pacing. He looked up, expecting compliance. Instead, Emily held up her hand. No, she said firmly. I am not giving you a cent. Not now, not ever. You've shown who you really are. You don't get to manipulate me, or my family, or my mother's illness, for your own gain. Mark's face tightened, incredulous. Emily, you can't do that. You promised me. I promised my mom, loyalty. Not you, Emily interrupted. That's the only promise that matters right now. For the first time, Mark saw her not as compliant, not as weak, not as someone to control, but as a woman who had finally drawn a line in the sand. Emily's turning point was simple but powerful. She no longer waited for permission, validation, or approval. She no longer allowed fear or guilt to dictate her decisions. She realized that strength didn't come from surviving betrayal quietly. It came from standing up to it. And that realization set the stage for the shock that would come next, the twist that would completely shift the power dynamic between her and Mark, and ultimately, the life Emily would start building on her own terms. Emily thought she had prepared for confrontation. She thought she knew exactly how Mark would react, but nothing could have prepared her for what came next. That evening, as she returned home to gather a few personal items, she found Mark's office door wide open. Curious and cautious, she peeked inside. On his laptop were emails, documents, and transfers she had never authorized. And then she saw it. A string of shady transactions, money moved from their joint account into accounts in his name alone. Money that wasn't hers, money that wasn't theirs legally. He had been siphoning savings for months, hiding it under the guise of family expenses. Her pulse raced. "Oh my God," she whispered. Then came the voice behind her. "You finally found out." Mark leaned against the doorframe, smug, like he had been waiting for this moment. "I knew you'd figure it out eventually. But don't worry. Nothing you do will change it." Emily's hands shook not with fear, but with rage. "You're insane. You were going to take my mother's money too, weren't you?" Mark smirked. "Not just hers. And not just you. This was never about love. Never. It's about control. And frankly, I am good at it." But then, something unexpected happened. Her phone buzzed. Sam's message, "Check the bank's fraud alert system. You might have a backup you didn't know about." Emily's mind raced. Could it be true? Could Mark's greed have a flaw he didn't account for? She logged into the bank app, her personal, untouched account. And there it was. Every dollar Mark thought he controlled had a paper trail. Automatic alerts, notifications of transfers he couldn't hide. She had evidence proof that if she acted smartly, she could protect her mother's money, her own, and confront him legally. The power had shifted. Mark, noticing her sudden, calm, and controlled movements, tensed. "What are you doing?" Emily smiled, faint but deadly. "I am taking back control. You think I am weak. You think ill bend. You're about to find out that I have eyes, and I have proof, and I won't let you manipulate me anymore." Mark's arrogance faltered. For the first time, he looked unsure. His plan, so carefully constructed, was unraveling before his eyes. The twist wasn't just financial, it was psychological. Mark had spent months believing Emily would comply, that fear and obligation would keep her in line. But her mother's words, her own awakening, and a little outside guidance had turned the tables. Emily realized betrayal had revealed not just his true nature, but her own strength, and that strength was a force Mark had never anticipated. For the first time in their marriage, she wasn't the victim. She was the one holding the cards. Emily didn't hesitate. The next morning, she called the bank, flagged the suspicious transactions, and froze all accounts connected to Mark. Every dollar he tried to claim or manipulate was now untouchable. Mark stormed into her home office that afternoon, fury written all over his face. "Emily, what did you do? You can't do that." "I already did," she said, calm but firm. "I won't let you control my life or my family. Your lies, your greed, they end now." For once, Mark had no words, no clever manipulation, no smirk to mask weakness. He realized that the woman he had tried to dominate was gone, the Emily who cowered, who feared confrontation, who obeyed for the sake of peace. In the days that followed, Emily used the evidence she had gathered to alert the authorities and consult a lawyer. She didn't need to fight blindly. She had proof of Mark's deception, proof of his attempts to exploit her and her mother. At the same time, she focused on her mother. Helen slowly recovered, thanks to Emily's unwavering presence and the medical care she now had full control over. Emily's dedication and clear boundaries allowed her mother to regain strength, and for the first time, Emily felt a sense of balance return to her life. Mark's attempts to intimidate her continued for a few weeks, threats, texts, even showing up at her home. But Emily remained unshaken. She had learned something far more valuable than money: her own voice, her own power, and the ability to act decisively when others tried to exploit her. Even Ben stepped back into her life, supportive now, admiring the strength Emily had displayed. Sam never left her side, guiding her through each legal step and every emotional hurdle. By the time the court proceedings began, the dynamic had completely shifted. Mark, once confident and controlling, was now the one on the defensive. Emily's evidence left him exposed, his schemes revealed to everyone he had tried to manipulate. The reversal of fate was clear. Emily, once trapped by guilt and obligation, now stood free. Her husband's power over her had crumbled. Her mother's well-being was secure. Her own sense of self-worth, long buried beneath years of compromise, had returned stronger than ever. Emily realized that betrayal, though painful, had been a catalyst. It had stripped away illusions, forced her to confront uncomfortable truths, and ultimately propelled her toward liberation. She didn't just survive the storm. She stood taller in its aftermath. Mark's downfall was swift, almost poetic. Within weeks of Emily taking action, the authorities discovered multiple financial irregularities in his accounts. What he had considered clever and hidden was exposed, leaving him facing serious legal consequences. Colleagues who had once admired him turned away. Friends he had flaunted his wealth to quietly distance themselves. The community that had seen him as successful now whispered about greed, manipulation, and betrayal. Even more biting was the fact that all the attempts he made to intimidate Emily backfired. Each threatening text, each confrontation, became documented evidence against him. His arrogance, which had fueled so many of his schemes, had become his undoing. Meanwhile, Emily's reputation soared, not because she wanted revenge, but because she had shown strength, intelligence, and moral clarity. Neighbors, friends, and family recognized the courage it took to stand up to someone like Mark. At home, the tension that had dominated her life evaporated. Mornings became calm again, filled with sunlight, coffee, and quiet conversation with her mother. The money that Mark had tried to claim was safe, and Emily even began planning small steps toward the life she had put aside for too long, a future of independence, creativity, and self-respect. Mark, by contrast, was isolated. His manipulations had alienated almost everyone who had ever cared for him. For the first time, he experienced the emptiness that comes from living a life built on selfishness and deceit. The arrogance that had once made him untouchable now left him vulnerable, humiliated, and powerless. Emily watched from a distance as karma played its part. She didn't need to orchestrate it, life simply caught up with him. The universe, she realized, had a way of balancing the scales. She felt a quiet satisfaction, not cruelty, but justice. The man who had demanded $15,000 while her mother fought for her life now faced the consequences of his own choices. And Emily, finally free from fear and manipulation, could embrace a life rooted in her own values, her own strength, and her own dignity. Karma, she understood, wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. And truth, she had learned, always finds a way. Weeks later, the hospital hallway felt different. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the sterile walls. Emily walked beside her mother, Helen, who was now walking with a steady gait, still frail but alive, breathing and smiling. Emily had never felt so light. The weight she had carried, the guilt, the fear, the constant tension with Mark was gone, replaced not by emptiness, but by clarity, purpose, and an unexpected sense of joy. She thought back to that night when Mark had demanded $15,000, when he had tried to block her from seeing her mother, when his greed had overshadowed every human instinct of compassion. At the time, it had felt like a crushing blow, like betrayal had reached its peak. But in retrospect, it had been the beginning, the catalyst for everything that followed. Her mother squeezed her hand. "I am proud of you, Helen whispered. "You stood your ground. You didn't let anyone take what was yours. You protected yourself, and you protected me." Emily swallowed, holding back tears. I couldn't let him win. Not over us, not over my life." Helen smiled faintly. "You didn't just protect us. You became the woman I always knew you could be." At home, the air was quiet but alive. Sam had been helping Emily with her finances and with legal follow-ups, and Ben had moved back into town, reconnecting in ways he had avoided for years. Their presence reminded Emily that family, real family, was about love, support, and accountability, not about manipulation or control. And Mark, he had been served notice, legal action, freezing of assets, and the looming reality of court dates had shattered the persona he had worked so hard to maintain. The man who once dictated her life with threats and money was now powerless, isolated, and fully exposed. The arrogance that had defined him was replaced with fear and regret, and Emily could finally watch without anxiety, without anger, without holding her breath. Karma had caught up to him. More importantly, Emily had reclaimed her own power. She started small, rebuilding boundaries and routines. She devoted mornings to her mother, afternoons to her work, and evenings to herself. She started journaling again, writing down dreams. She had long abandoned dreams of travel, independence, and creativity. Slowly, cautiously, she began to believe in herself again. The final lesson hit her one evening as she sat on her porch, Helen beside her, sipping tea. The sky was painted in streaks of pink and orange. She reflected on the past months, the betrayal, the awakening, the fight for justice. She realized that life wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about how you responded to it. It was about rising when others tried to push you down, speaking when others tried to silence you, and reclaiming your own life, no matter the cost. Emily knew that if she hadn't faced Mark's cruelty head-on, she would never have discovered her own strength. If she hadn't confronted the betrayal, she would never have learned that love and loyalty are not about sacrifice at the expense of self-respect. And if she hadn't acted decisively, she might never have protected her mother or herself. Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts. You're free now, not just from him. From fear, from doubt, from everything that held you back. Hold on to this feeling. Let it guide you." Emily looked at the horizon, a gentle smile on her face. She didn't need validation from Mark or anyone else. She didn't need their approval or their money. She had something far more valuable: clarity, courage, and a life rebuilt on her own terms. And as the sun set over Charlotte, Emily whispered to herself. No one will ever control me again. Not with threats, not with money, not with manipulation. I am my own person. I am my mother's daughter, and I am free. In that moment, she felt complete. The storms of betrayal, the weight of loyalty, the anger, and the heartbreak, all of it had led her here. Stronger, wiser, unshakable. And for the first time in a long time, Emily truly believed in the life she was about to live. Fully, freely, and with no compromises. Her mother squeezed her hand again. You did it, Em. You stood tall. And you'll keep standing. Emily nodded, letting the warmth of that moment sink in. She had learned that betrayal could hurt, but courage could heal. That greed could destroy, but truth could liberate. That life could be unfair, but resilience, self-respect, and love could restore it. And with that knowledge, she stepped forward into freedom, into life, and into the future she had always deserved. Emily Parker finally found peace and stability after the storm of betrayal. With Mark legally barred from accessing her finances and the evidence of his manipulations exposed, she reclaimed control over her life. Her mother, Helen, gradually recovered under Emily's vigilant care, their bond deeper and more resilient than ever. Ben, who had once been distant and estranged, became an unexpected ally, supporting Emily and helping rebuild family trust. Even Sam's guidance had proven invaluable, offering unwavering friendship and practical wisdom that allowed Emily to navigate the chaos with clarity and courage. Mark, on the other hand, faced the full weight of his actions. His financial manipulations, his emotional abuse, and his greed all became public knowledge through legal channels. Colleagues and friends who had once admired him recoiled when they saw his true character. He lost credibility, control, and the very influence he had wielded over Emily. In court, his schemes were laid bare. He was forced to compensate Emily financially and suffered social humiliation. The man who demanded $15,000 from a wife during her mother's critical illness was left stripped of both respect and power, a poetic justice for the choices he made. Helen, Emily's mother, grew stronger with every passing day, not just physically, but emotionally, witnessing her daughter's awakening. She often told Emily, with a proud smile, "You've always had this strength, you just needed to see it yourself." The supporting characters, though minor in direct conflict, played key roles in reinforcing the story's moral arc. Loyalty, truth, and integrity ultimately outshined deceit and selfishness. Emily's journey was more than reclaiming money or confronting betrayal, it was a profound transformation of the self. The pain she endured, the sleepless nights at her mother's side, and Mark's relentless manipulation forced her to confront the uncomfortable truth. She had been living her life in fear of others' judgment, sacrificing her own needs and happiness. Through confrontation, legal action, and unwavering support from friends and family, Emily discovered her voice. She learned that strength was not about suppressing emotion or silently enduring injustice, but about taking deliberate action for oneself and those she loved. She embraced boundaries, recognized toxic patterns, and realized that love could not coexist with exploitation. Most importantly, Emily learned to trust herself. She became decisive, confident, and emotionally resilient. She stopped measuring her worth through marks, approval, or societal expectations, and instead defined her own values. Holding her mother's hand in the hospital, and later standing in court against her husband, Emily experienced the awakening every woman in her position deserves: liberation from manipulation, clarity about her own needs, and the courage to pursue a life of dignity. By the end, Emily wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her home, once a battleground of control and fear, became a sanctuary of respect, love, and personal sovereignty. Every step she took forward reinforced a new truth: betrayal can break you, but it can also ignite the courage to reclaim your life. Sometimes, life teaches its harshest lessons in the quietest moments when the people you love are in danger, and those who promise to stand beside you show their true colors. Emily learned that loyalty without boundaries is not strength, it's vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Betrayal, while painful, revealed the power she didn't know she had. It taught her that love should protect, not control. That family, true friends, and moral courage are the real wealth we carry, and that no one has the right to demand your integrity, your money, or your heart during moments of vulnerability. If there is a message in Emily's story, it is this: strength often comes in the form of quiet resolve, in saying no when it feels impossible, in trusting yourself even when others fail you. Karma has a way of balancing the scales, but the real victory comes from rising above, protecting what matters, and refusing to let someone else define your worth. At the end of the day, Emily held her mother's hand, looked out at the life she had fought to reclaim, and breathed a long, steady breath of freedom. And in that breath, there was peace, there was clarity, and there was a promise. No one can take from you what you refuse to surrender. Life will test you. Betrayal will come. But awakening, courage, and self-respect, they are yours to claim.